Thank you for being with Startup Lady today. This is Koko, one of the co-founders of Startup Lady. We're so glad that you're spending time with us. I know that it's Sunday afternoon for a few of us, and for others, it's evening time. So thank you so much for being with us. Just to give you a little bit of background on us, Startup Lady, we are an organization bringing gender equality to the startup community. We're fostering a safe space and a community for women and non-binary individuals so they can find, start, and grow their own businesses with inspiration, education, and support. Today, we organize this live to bring value and support to everyone in the community during these times. I am really excited today because we have three amazing guests that are joining us. We have Frith calling in from Alaska, who is a serial entrepreneur and founder of Native English Institute. Frith's success has stemmed from a critical need in today's economy, learning quickly from others and passing on that knowledge to others. Today, we hear how she's applied that talent to mentoring. Our next guest is, we have Rosanne calling in from Oregon. Rosanne Gostovich Royer has grown her career from teaching Russian to bridging international relationships and empowering local communities around Washington state. And lastly, we have Misaki calling in from Malaysia. Misaki joins us today to detail how she's benefited from thoughtful mentoring. She began hesitant to act on her dreams and is now an ambassador of EdTech Asia. Please join me in welcoming our guest today, who will be talking about the importance of mentorship, how to mentor, and how to be mentored. So today, I really would love to start with Frith, because Frith is one of our Startup Lady mentors, and we were having a conversation on why she is a mentor with Startup Lady, and I'd love to start with Frith and how she became a mentor, and any kind and her thoughts on mentorship.
Well, let me start with going back in history to the 1980s. You know, today in 2020, the pandemic and climate change and a lot of issues feel really scary. In the mid-80s, we had never heard of any of those things, frankly. And the biggest perceived threat in the world was that the US and the USSR would launch a nuclear war. And it was a time when Americans and Soviets knew almost nothing about each other. Soviet people couldn't travel. They weren't free to associate with foreigners. And there was this huge gap in understanding and connection. My mom believed in global dialogue. And she said, you study Russian. So I did. I studied Russian. I lived in the USSR for a year. And that was the year that Gorbachev came to power. And things began to change. And things began to change on the Russian side. They also began to change because on the American side, there were change agents. Rosanne Royer was one of those people who also believed, like my mom, that ordinary people could reduce the risk of a nuclear conflict between these superpowers. And Rosanne chaired an organization called the Seattle-Tashkent Sister City Committees. So Tashkent, Misaki has been there, is the capital of Uzbekistan, which was at that time a republic of this USSR. And when Rosanne and her committee formed this connection between a major city in the US and a major city in the USSR. I think it was the first sister city relationship. Was it, Rosanne?
Was the first US-USSR sister city relationship, and established in 1973.
And it was a really big deal. It's hard to imagine now, but before Perestroika, before Gorbachev, ordinary Russians had no contact with anyone outside the Soviet bloc. They were afraid of having anything to do with me as an American studying there because they could lose their jobs. They could be thrown out of university for being openly friendly. I've always loved the mountains. And so at Leningrad State University, I joined the climbing club. And I made a lot of friends with climbers. And I knew that when you get into the mountains, when you get away from the city, you get away from the KGB minders, that it was very easy to get Russians to be open and talk about their lives and their fears and their concerns and share information. I wanted to create a mountaineering exchange between Seattle and Tashkent, between Washington State and the USSR. That's how I met Rosanne. I noticed one of your questions, Koko, was how did you find your mentor? Well, I was very shameless about finding a mentor. I went to Rosanne's committee and I said, I want you to sponsor my mountaineering exchange. P.S. I was very young and I had no experience. I did know how to speak Russian. And so that's how it started. I knew that if we could take climbers from Washington State to Uzbekistan, and we could bring a group of climbers from Uzbekistan to Washington State, that we could make some really amazing connections, and that people would learn about each other and realize, oh, we're not enemies. We actually have a lot in common. And it wasn't possible to organize that expedition without sponsorship. So when I proposed to the Seattle Tashkent Sister City Committee that they sponsor this mountaineering exchange, for some reason, Rosanne and her committee chose to back me.
I guess that, I'll have my chance to say why. Is this the moment? But
well, let me just tell a little bit more about what unfolded, because it turned into something absolutely amazing. In 1987, a group of mountaineers from Washington State spent 3 weeks in Uzbekistan. Please remember, this had never been done. Foreigners had not been allowed to interact with Soviets and vice versa without a huge amount of control. So we spent 3 weeks in 2 beautiful mountain ranges. Many friendships came out of it. A lot of intense conversations around the fireside. And the following year, in 1988, we hosted a group of climbers from Uzbekistan in Washington State. And this was about much more than climbing, because when we were preparing to go up mountains, like who has had a coffee called the Mountain of Seattle? That Mountain of Seattle coffee is a real mountain. I know you've had one, Koko. And so Mount Rainier is, of course, the biggest mountain in Washington State. And before we climbed Rainier and other peaks, we were hosted, these Uzbek climbers were hosted in small towns in Washington, and people who always thought that the Soviets were our enemies realized they're really cool, interesting people, and vice versa. So there was a big ripple effect. There was a lot of media coverage, and this was only one of dozens of projects that Rosanne and her committee sponsored. And we were all volunteers. We worked really hard without getting paid. And frankly, that's why when I saw Misaki as the ambassador for EdTech Asia, I was so impressed. I recognized something that I think maybe Rosanne saw in me when I was in my 20s. And I saw that in Misaki because she was so dedicated to her EdTech Asia event organization.
I wonder if I could add here, because it's very appropriate to the group that has gathered, to your intentions to help women in business to get started. There actually was, in the case of Frith's project, there actually was a feminist issue because Frith wanted to be the person leading this first climbers group to Uzbekistan. And by the way, she earlier referred often to Russians hadn't been out of the country and so on. And if they had never been, you can be sure that it was with our sister city, it was every 2 years we had a delegation from Tashkent. And then on those alternating years, a small delegation from Seattle would go over, but we just waited and waited, and we did educational programs. And then when Gorbachev came along and things were falling apart in the Soviet Union, and they said, we can open the doors now, we better open the doors now. Our sister city had been so persistent in keeping that relationship. And as sparse as those things were, we were the flagship sister city, and they just opened the doors, and we were supposed to be the model. And boy, did the ideas for exchanges come in right and left, all over the state of Washington. What we were really looking for was that variety, but Frith's case was especially, it was interesting because it was a matter of Frith having quite a lot of resentment from the male potential climbers going with her, and Frith being the leader. She can't do that. She's a woman.
Because it was the 1980s, and not only were women not in business, they weren't climbing.
Right, they were climbing for sure. So when I have to say that the mentorship part, when I think that the business of a mentor, people look for mentors, but sometimes the relationship is something that just simply should not be ignored. If you see number one, I think the sincerity of a person. You talk about Misaki's dedication. First of all, I have to tell you that Frith's a very nice looking woman right now. But you should have seen her when she was just out of college. She looked like a combination of like Alice in Wonderland and Rapunzel and Goldilocks. And I mean, I don't know, it was this hair that was so golden and all kind of crinkly. And she was just absolutely stunningly beautiful. And I thought, why does this person need any help from anybody? But you see, that's the wrong kind of thinking too. What she had was, I could see this immediately, was humility. And when someone has humility, they're a good potential learner. They really mean it when they say, I'd like to have your help. And so the other part was that this was a very nice project to put in the mix. You know, it was an opportunity for us to go outside the usual, oh, we're going to get some teachers together, we're going to get, some doctors together and so on, all these people in the cities. She had something that was an outdoor activity. And then we actually had a very dramatic moment where a notable climber in Washington State came to one of the gatherings of these mountaineers and challenged Frith, being the leader, and said that he would walk out the door if she was going to be a leader. And I said, there's the door. Basically that's what it had to be, because he just simply would not consider what the background was and the skills were. The mentoring part is where
Rosanne, can we just pause there? Because when we talk about how to be a mentor and who to trust as your mentor will have your back. And at that moment, this famous name climber who tried to basically steal my project, he he had all the qualifications. He had done first ascents. He had recognition from the climbing community, but he wasn't the person who was actually committed to the goal of creating dialogue between Soviets and Americans. And so I'm incredibly grateful to Rosanne that at that moment, the easy thing for her to do would have been to say, yeah, you're right. You're the big name climber. We're just going to let this young woman spend some more time earning her reputation. But that's not what Rosanne and her committee did. And it was a very, I often think that Japan, the way that women are treated in Japan today often reminds me of the US 20 or more years ago. And I think what Rosanne's example is that you have to step in and defend other women when you see this happening too.
And I would say after listening to everybody, it isn't just that I thought, oh, Frith's really cool and we just have to have her doing this project. It was listening to everybody in the room, and it was very tense because there were other people, or it really was a chance that, some of the other climbers who would have really made this a big deal might not go along. And I wasn't harsh. I mean, I didn't say there's the door. I that's just the way that I put it here. But I just said, I'm sorry. This is what we put together. Frith came to us with this project. She's been the leader of this project. We're trusting that she's going to do it. And her Russian is quite good. And I don't know how good his was. I mean, he left Soviet territory, sometime, a long time ago. So I don't know how good his Russian was. But I think it was just seeing the real sincerity and the dedication to what the whole mission of these people exchanges is. And that is that you're going to go to the other side and you're going to be open-minded and, try to break through this tremendous barrier that existed for so long. So that was, the history of it. Definitely as a mentor, and as I say, it's a kind of an organic thing. If you see something and someone is really right for mentorship, you just step in and you do it. And there will be some of those hard times, but Frith was definitely someone who, impressed all of us, and it was very clear that but then there is, of course, I just want to add one quick thing. Then there is all the details that come afterward, because there's just some things Frith wanted to do and they couldn't be done, or we had to rewrite her proposal or whatever. So there's a lot of other detail that comes with it.
I'm curious to actually hear if that's, similar to how Frith felt when she met Misaki.
Well, the situation was a little bit different, but I felt similarly impressed by Misaki's guts and determination. And the funny thing was, so I should give you the background. Misaki and I met. Misaki was the student at Bellevue College of my colleague in Native English Institute.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Your colleague was my teacher back then. But yeah, and then her student, one of my group in the Seattle College, the another friend introduced us together in the Tokyo. It was not actually her colleague either.
Yeah. So we kind of found each other through networking. And I observed Misaki as an organizer, and I thought, wow, she's not like most of the young women I meet. She is really, first of all, generous. I was really struck by, Misaki, by your generosity of spirit, that you were committed to EdTech Asia as an organization. You had a sense of ownership about it. And I saw how you worked as a volunteer, you worked incredibly hard, and that felt really familiar to me. It reminded me of a time when I had a project that I believed in so much that it didn't matter that I wasn't getting paid to do it. And what happened next?
Actually, I didn't expect we become this close when we first met. I thought you're like very American mindset of person.
I'm also much older than you.
Mm-hmm. Also, like you know a lot about Japanese culture to get along with, but I didn't expect when we first met. I thought you're like, I thought you don't really know the culture here. So I thought, oh, maybe I should help you to get along with the Japan culture or that kind of things.
Yeah.
I ended up I'm being mentee, then get the confidence to work abroad. That's what I wanted to do for a very long time. Yeah.
So may I tell the story about the confidence certificate?
Sure.
Yeah.
The confidence certificate?
I'm excited.
I wish I had a picture of this confidence certificate, but I'm afraid I don't have a picture. But I was so impressed by Misaki. I thought, here's a young woman who is going places. She can do anything. She and Misaki had helped me a lot with making different business connections and introductions to interesting people. And so we were having dinner with another friend, Hashimoto-san, and Misaki was talking about how she really wanted to leave her corporate job and work abroad. And you said, I don't have any confidence, right? and Hashimoto-san and I had the same reaction. We said, nobody's going to give you confidence. And then I wrote on I think a napkin, right?
Yeah, it was just no, it was
A scrap
wow,
of paper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
Then yeah, you wrote the certification for me to have more confidence to keep
Yes.
challenging it. Back then, I have kept failing the interviews to go work abroad. So then I'm like, maybe no hope for me anymore. But yeah, she gave me the certification. I believe that helped my mindset to keep challenging it. Then now I'm in Kuala Lumpur to work in startup,
Well,
which we wanted to do.
I didn't do anything. All I did was say, here's your certificate of confidence. You did all the work. But I recognized from seeing you as a volunteer in this organization whose work I respected, I realized I saw your talent, and I knew that you could do anything that you challenged yourself with. And so another point I want to make about mentoring and being mentored is it's not a one-way street. I've learned as much from Misaki as she may have learned from me, maybe more, right? So some of us have more life experience, which just really means we've made more mistakes to learn from. But the learning goes both ways all the time.
Well, and you know, there is, we can put an official title on that activity of mentorship or menteeship. It's actually going on a lot of the time. My mother was born in Croatia way back before it became Yugoslavia. And she told me one day that my younger brother followed me everywhere when we were preschoolers. And I have this very graphic picture of, coming home from school on a sunny day, and my little brother would be waiting for me because he wasn't in school yet. I was in second grade or something. And we'd go down to the hen house together to gather up the eggs. That was the thing that we did. But she said he was following me around all the time. And you don't realize, when you have brothers and sisters, that if you're older, you probably are a mentor to someone else. I also think about to someone else in the family. And then I think about graduate school, and I think about how I struggled many times with my studies. I majored in my master's degree in East European studies, which I was deeply interested in, but I had some problems with my writing and just thinking things through. And my major professor, that was his job to guide me. But I really thought of him as being a mentor because he really did walk me through many steps. And I think that's one thing a mentor does. They don't just say, oh, come on, you can do it. You can do it. Just do it. It really boils down to some details, some real details, and taking the time to, to work those out and to be very patient. I mean, it's hard for me to hear that Misaki said she didn't have confidence when here she was leading you all over, introducing you to people. And I think sometimes people don't realize that they have confidence. But I do think as a mentee, I don't know how many people listening in know who Mr. Rogers is and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. They made a movie of it, but it was a television show that ran a long time where this very grandfatherly character told stories and talked to kids about their morals and, what proper behavior and, all kinds of things. But he had this saying, and I'm sure I don't have it quite right, but it was, when you're in trouble, take a deep breath and then take a step back and then ask for help. and I think that is that it is really hard sometimes for people to ask for help. But the minute that you do and someone sees that you are sincere, that you really want to achieve something, they're usually willing to help, and they're usually willing to follow you and see how you're doing. So I think a big key to all of this is don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid. Don't think you're going to be sounding stupid or you're not qualified enough or whatever. If you really want to do something, I think you see someone who knows how to do it, ask for help. That really is what it boils down to in many respects.
We have a question from Akiko from our team. If you notice your mentee is having setback, how do you guide them onto the right path?
And what was the rest of the question? How do you?
Once a mentee is asking for help, but you kind of realize that your mentee is having some setbacks, how do you guide them onto the right path?
You want to? I can speak to that. Frith, do you want to go first?
Well, I think you just touched on it, Rosanne. You said that very often we're afraid to ask for help. We're embarrassed. We think that we wouldn't be having trouble if we'd done something right the first time. And it's so important to recognize that anytime you set out to do something big and challenging and untried, whether it's building a company or a nonprofit project, you are going to struggle. It's hard to be an entrepreneur. And so just accepting that if you don't do it, you won't have any trouble, but you also won't accomplish what you want to.
Well, and there was a point where I was in a short-term kind of business arrangement doing some trade things between what was then Yugoslavia, just like we talked about the former Soviet Union, the former Yugoslavia. And what I discovered in going over there was just how harsh it was to get a great big no, a no. And I went to someone and I talked about that, and they said, one thing you have to understand, at least about this country you're dealing with, is don't ever take the first no as an answer. If you have a good product, you just keep going back. I mean, there is a certain point where if they actually throw you out the door and say, I never want to see you again, but it's absolutely true that sometimes people aren't ready for you, or your idea is really good, or you're a woman and they're not used to it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, going back and asking again, and I think this is true even in our family relationships and other relationships. Somebody might misunderstand you, and then you can think about, how can I reform this, what I just said? How can I say this in a different way? But gosh, I think it's really scary to go out and try to get into business, because it really hurts when somebody says no. It really does.
Actually, that's something Misaki and I have discussed. How many times is it okay to be told no in Japan and keep going back? So you helped me with that one.
Yeah. And what was the answer to that? What was the answer to that in Japan?
Depends, but I just advised her it's okay to email once a month at least. If it's more than that, and if they are saying no, which is pretty unusual in Japan, maybe you don't want to go back anymore. Yeah, we don't really say no usually. I think you realize it already.
Well, and the question about what happens if the person you're mentoring really has a setback and they just say, I don't know if I want to keep going with this. I think a general rule is that's how you feel today. Take a break, and let's talk about this again in a couple of days. I mean, there's a lot of people who throw in the towel. You know, I don't know how many people succeed in business, but there's inevitably that point where it just feels like it's just too hard. You know, this really is just too hard. And then, of course, you can roll out the examples. Now YouTube is full of all kinds of success stories and TED Talks where you can be re-inspired. You know, you can go on YouTube and say, what do I do when I get discouraged? And you probably get a lot of answers there. But but you know, I think just then talking to several people, talking to people in your family, it's really hard to admit that you failed at something or you think you failed. So I don't know. I mean, for me, it's like Mr. Rogers says, you know, take a deep breath and take a break. You go plant some petunias in your garden and then come back, or whatever it is you plant in your garden.
But Rosanne, I think you touched on it when you said being told no isn't actually something you need to take personally. In fact, all the good salespeople I know say that a no is to be celebrated because it's the next step closer to yes. So when someone tells you no, the right answer is thank you. Now.
Right. Yeah, that's right. I've heard many a story too where you've gotten no's along the way, and then sometimes when it sounds like the person you're trying to sell to or whatever seems to start, you know, what am I trying to say? They're indecisive. You don't want to walk away at that point, you know, because that's when they're ready to. So I think being alert to that, you can't get too used to hearing no so that you don't hear the beginning of a yes when it comes along. I mean, I've just had that happen to me many times. And it's just a matter of then, okay, go brush up your argument a little bit. Give a few more examples. Tell that person that you're trying to convince that, so I talked to so-and-so, you know, and this is why they like my product. I mean, I think that the people who are listening in know those things, but it really is that relationship of somebody who has experience with a person who's struggling, that it is really important to go to them and you know, keep asking that advice, and as long as you're positive. And you know, this is what I saw in Frith was there were setbacks, but then to just keep going. Say, what's another angle that we can take on this? But it's no fun to get a no from anybody. It just isn't. So I just applaud everybody amongst you who is on your way to setting up a business, or you're working hard, you're struggling with it, because it's a real achievement. It really is.
Yeah, thank you, Rosanne. I would love to hear some details on like maintaining the relationship and practice ways in making a mentorship successful. Maybe Chris, do you want to start this time?
Go have a beer together.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder if people get too attached to the idea of thinking that a mentor relationship is formalized, that we sign a contract. I'm going to mentor you, I'm going to be mentored by you. I've never actually seen that work. In my experience, there are people like Rosanne, who I consider the mentor. I should add that this intense volunteer project that Rosanne and I collaborated on, and not just me and Rosanne, there were hundreds of people involved in Washington State, in Uzbekistan. Some of them may be even watching this live stream. And it was the combination of so many efforts of people who just got really excited about what we were doing. And some of those people worked at a company that ended up offering me a job, and it led to a really interesting career for me. So I did ultimately end up getting paid to do exactly what I wanted to do, which was organize expeditions in the USSR. I did it for almost 10 years. It was a fabulous career. I published
wrote a book. And you wrote a book.
I published 2 books about it. But I couldn't have done that if Rosanne and her committee had not backed me. And so what I want everyone to know is, even if your dream seems really unattainable, if it seems really out of reach because no one's ever done it before, and frankly, I didn't have the experience, if you believe in it, you can do almost anything. And Koko, I appreciated the way that you opened this session. You said, in these times, we want to bring people programs. These times are times of opportunity. These are times of people with big ideas. Even if they don't have the experience of implementing those ideas, they can change a lot. I know this without a doubt.
Yeah, I do want to say, Koko, that in the United States, I don't know if this is true in Japan, but there are many, there's a number of organizations that actually ask their members, who are professional people, to mentor up and coming business people, whatever it is that occupation might be. So I'll give you one example, is that I'm involved with an organization in Seattle called the Ethnic Heritage Council. And one of our board members he's a young man, he got his law degree, his doctoral at the University of Washington, and tried to start his own business. He really worked very hard at that, and had a partner, and then they split, and then he tried a little bit more, and then just simply had to go and do some non-lawyer type work to survive. But in the meantime, he heard that there was this group of business people who were retired people from major businesses in the area, like Microsoft and Boeing, etc. And you could apply to get one of them to be your mentor. And so he did, and he ended up getting a job at Microsoft. But the person who mentored him was not with Microsoft. He was with a big law firm, or formerly a law firm. So does Japan have anything like that, where retired specialists, professionals are available where it is known to the community that you can apply to have one of these very top level people who are now retired, where they can be your mentor? Is there such a thing in Japan?
There must be some, but maybe Misaki, do you know any at this time?
I don't know specific organization actually, but like my dad, he worked in their company for a long time and he now retired, but he still helps the company to help their projects there. I think it's like one of the things that you mentioned right now. Like, it's
And
just
we have organizations of retired people who will volunteer to help your organization set up things like bookkeeping or something like that. I just wondered if there was that phenomenon in Japan at all, because there are places where you can go to get professionals who will advise you, volunteer for you, and so on. And then I also think that there.
But Rosanne, can I interject here?
Yeah.
I think it's important to have an idea of what you want to do.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So retired professionals or professionals who are still working, many people are glad to help younger people in their careers, but you have to first have a vision of what you want to do and why you want to do it.
Yeah.
And when I saw Misaki, I knew that I was seeing that person, that here was someone who is really committed to education. I love the fact that Misaki is now studying code. Am I allowed to tell that, or was that a secret?
it's okay.
Oops.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm learning in the Yansan school with the what does she do in Startup Lady again?
Yan Fan, she's also a mentor and she's also on our board of
Yeah,
directors.
mentor for Startup Ladies.
That's great. I didn't even know.
I'm learning in her school right now. Yeah.
So I saw in Misaki someone who was just ready to burst out of her cocoon. I saw a lot of talent and dedication. And one other thing I want to mention that I saw in Misaki is her commitment to relationships. She's very, very reliable in how she communicates with people, both in volunteer context and I assume in a professional context. And interesting work is all about relationships, how you treat the people who believe in you, who rely on you. And I saw that Misaki was young in her career and she's really solid. She has a sense of responsibility about relationships. And I think if you go to someone, so this is back to your question, Koko, about how do you find a mentor? How do you be a mentor? Your mentors are all around you. Just look around, right? Anyone you admire is potentially your mentor. If you, and this can be really simple things like if they post something on LinkedIn that you find interesting, comment on it, engage in it. I know LinkedIn is not widely used in Japan, but if you want to work outside Japan, you have to be on LinkedIn, right, Misaki? Maybe not Asia, but at least the rest of
What is that?
It's the professional equivalent of Facebook.
Like Facebook.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, not many people.
Oh, LinkedIn. Are you saying LinkedIn?
LinkedIn.
Oh, I know what that is. Okay,
Yeah.
I thought you were saying some whole other new word.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my goodness, I'm really.
Actually, on the topic of LinkedIn, I actually have a question from the audience from Instagram. Tisani Josette. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, but should the mentor be in the same field of work as you do or want to do, or a different one? Because like, for example, with LinkedIn, you could see an article and you could see someone write about something that may not be their particular industry. What are your thoughts on that?
Interesting.
What do you think, Misaki?
I personally don't think so. I think it's the best to have it in the same industry, but I feel more importantly your personal background is similar, something relevant. I had many like mentor. I don't know if I can call them mentor. But I think they are mentors in Japan. But most of them were guys, because I was joining many startup events, which is mostly not ladies. But sometimes, I mean, their comments are very helpful. But sometimes, like, oh, I want to go abroad and work because I think it's going to be too late after I have babies, I have families in Japan. I cannot leave the country. Like that kind of comments. They never understand it. So, like, I'm not feminist personally. I'm like, I don't really care if they are lady or guy, but sometimes I felt the gap between me and them. Oh, that's how they think, but I don't believe what they say it because they cannot think it realistically.
Mm.
So I just believe their background should be similar.
Could
I
I
have
ask?
to.
Oh, sorry. I was just going
Go
to
ahead.
ask quickly, the listeners to the program right now, where are they from? Primarily Japan, or are there other countries that are listening in?
I would say predominantly Japan, but we do have followers from all over the world. So it's hard to determine at this time
Yeah,
who is with us
okay.
right now.
Misaki, please, you're a feminist. Anyone who believes that women have a right to self-determination is a feminist. It is a label to wear proudly.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you brought up a really interesting point, which is maybe when it comes to work-life balance, family issues, maybe there are ways in which having a woman mentor is more helpful for a woman. Rosanne, I'm really relieved that you brought up the issue of the guy who tried to take over my project, because you remember it with a great deal of clarity, and I realize now that you really stood strong for me in a way that I was grateful for then, and I appreciate now even more how challenging that was.
Well, I guess I would disagree with you a little bit about wearing a badge that you're a feminist, because I've never believed that you'd necessarily wear a badge to stand for what is right. It just and something, unfortunately, I think rather than by saying something, it's by doing it. Don't need to wear a badge and say,
Rosanne, the reason I said that is because some people actually think that feminist has become a dirty word, and I
well, that's the
I
thing.
refuse to buy that.
Well, exactly, and I don't have any fears about using the term myself, but I think it does. You're always at risk. It's always a scary thing, and then for a feminist to be used in a negative way, by people who are referring to you. So it can frighten you, but it is not. I think just by your actions and by who you stand behind, and the fact that you're making your way in business, it's that sort of is what that is. You're being a feminist.
I also want to add that I've had a lot of male mentors, a lot of male friends, and business mentors who I've learned a lot from. So to me, being a feminist doesn't mean that that I think that women mentors are somehow superior or have greater knowledge. Just that maybe in the example that you brought up, Misaki, that they can relate more to the pressures of working abroad after you have a family, which, by the way, I think you will be able to do very gracefully if you decide to do that.
So I have a question, Frith. I know that you mentioned earlier that, to get someone to become interested to mentor you, you need to have an exact vision. This is actually a question from Shanti. But wondering if, okay, I know you already answered it, but hold on. So what can people do if they don't have an exact vision or determination, but they are determined to find a mentor?
Help other people. Help if you know you want to be an entrepreneur, but you're not sure what you need to do. That's normal. Okay, that's perfectly normal. What you need to do is contribute to other people's projects until the inspiration hits you. You will know when the moment arrives. It will be very clear to you. This is my calling. This is what I need to do. But if you just sit around waiting for someone else to tell you, it's kind of like waiting for confidence to suddenly strike you. You have to do what Misaki did, and just grab hold of her confidence, even if it feels a little bit, not as strong as you might like it. But I'm really proud of the way that Misaki started applying for foreign jobs and faced a lot of challenges, frankly. I think you've become something of an expert in the past year, Misaki, in international business.
I hope I became. I'm still learning a lot and challenging a lot of things, but
yeah, but you could write your own book about helping foreign-owned companies understand Japanese business culture.
hopefully, yeah. Now understanding both sides right now.
Yeah, Misaki, I'd love to hear about like the impact mentorship has had on your life, and how your mindset has grown through all the mentors that you've had up until now.
Well, like from when I was little, right? Not little, like teenagers, I had difficulties to ask help because I'm the first kids in the family. So that I always thought, oh, I'm the one who is not supposed to ask the help. But after a while, I kind of realized people who help other people are also helped. You know what I mean? Even though you are physically helping the other people, your mentality, you feel fulfilled a bit after you help other people. You are like a bit happier than before. Also, I feel that way too. When I help someone, I see them growing up, even though they don't really appreciate it to me. They don't really thank you to me, but I'm already happy to see them becoming happier than before I mentor them. So when I realized it, I'm like, oh, maybe I can ask help more, so that I don't have any hesitation to ask help now compared to before, I guess. So what was the question? That's
I'd like to ask
but I
another
think
question.
the mentoring starts.
I'd like to ask another question about within the Japanese business practices and volunteerism. We often hear in the United States that other countries don't employ volunteers to the degree, excuse me, I need to change the wording, that their volunteerism is not as great in other countries as it is in the United States. Of course, one of the reasons that we have to have that in the United States is that our government does not fund many of the things that I believe they ought to be funding, like, Medicare for everybody, medical insurance for everyone, that the whole population is covered. But something that I can give one of my nieces as an example of a real challenge she had. She had a rather stunning, outstanding international career. She is a specialist in investigating, crises, such as happened in Bosnia and Srebrenica. So when she returned to Seattle, she wanted to come back after working very hard internationally. She was really kind of worn out from it. She wanted to enter the business world in Seattle, but she found what many people have found who have worked abroad is that even in Seattle, which is an international city, that there really isn't the same environment as there is in other cities in the world, that there isn't really like a society of these people like her who have this vast international experience, but they just can't, people just don't get how valuable they are. They don't quite have a place for them. So she just looked and looked for work. I mean, fortunately, she was able to take the time to do that. But she finally decided that she heard, she read about a lot of places where she thought that her investigative background would fit. And she just went to the Attorney General's office in the state of Washington and said, I'd like to volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
And so she just went in, and that's an example of looking for mentorship from a
Yes.
big group of people, and so she just went in there and they discovered, what her background was. So she had to prove that she had something that was international, but could be applied locally. And she got a job. I mean, they just were so impressed with what it is that she could do. And she was willing to be there as a volunteer for, I don't know how long it was, a number of months, quite almost a year. And then a job opening came up and she applied for it and they knew her, so they hired her. So that's an example of going after mentorship on a larger scale, And I think Frith said, or maybe Misaki did, you go and you watch what somebody else is doing. You just try to help them with their effort while you're figuring out how you can fit in. Does that happen in Japan? Could you go to a Japanese company and volunteer to work there for free for a year on the chance that they might have an opening for you someday?
I think it's considered as internship, unpaid internship, which is not very common in big company, but it's common in startups, I think.
Is that for free then? It's volunteer, the internship is a volunteer thing, or do you get paid to be an intern?
If it's like startup corporate, like the company that makes money, that you're supposed to get paid. But if it's like non-profit, like UN-related, like volunteer-based organization, it's unpaid. Depends on it, but it's not as common as in the US. I started volunteering after I went to Seattle as well. I've never done it before I went to.
Yeah, and I could actually say the same because I studied in San Diego, and I can honestly say that I feel like my life changed, and it only really began when I started doing volunteer work. It actually became my hobby, and I'm still very passionate about helping people and making a positive impact on this world. And when I was in San Diego, I did a lot of volunteer work, and that was actually kind of my journey, where my journey began, and I found jobs in that way. I also met some of my first mentors, like Jun Han from Better San Diego, and I really missed it, when I moved to Japan about 5 years ago, because it wasn't that easy. Like, I could barely find volunteer opportunities because firstly, I am limited by my lack of fluency in Japanese. But secondly, there seems to be a lot of extensive screening process. So it's definitely not as easy as when I was in California to find volunteer opportunities. And it didn't seem to be like a common thing between the people that I knew. So I feel that volunteer opportunities only really started, and I only heard a lot about it when I joined the startup community, when I co-founded Startup Lady.
Yes, and I was talking about, it's one thing to volunteer for a non-profit organization, but I was more referring to just simply approaching a business and saying, I'd really like to learn. I'd like to learn more about this. I think I want to do this kind of work. Could you just let me in the door and just let me be around and help you with anything you need help with? I don't know if that works in Japan. Does it?
You want to help us? I'm in Japan. as a volunteer worker there?
I think it's fairly unusual in Japan, which is why it's probably even more powerful.
Yeah.
That if you want someone who has experience that you want to learn from, if you want them to take the time to help you, you actually need to demonstrate why you deserve their time. And once you do that, there are a lot of people who will help you. You may already know your mentors. I think one thing I love about you, Misaki, is that you're very open to learning from people of all ages and anyone. And I should mention that I love Misaki's grandmother. And I happen to believe that part of the reason that you're successful is because you have a grandmother who believes in you.
Yeah. But sometimes I forget Frith is like my mom's age, I think.
Exactly.
Sometimes I forget. And then I'm like, oh, I will bring my friends. I said it to my family because she joined my family lunch before. And then they expected like friends means like my age, similar to my age.
Yeah. And instead I'm Oba-chan.
No, I didn't mean. Well, like, oh yeah. So yeah, I realized, oh, you're a bit far in terms of the numbers of the number.
Misaki, are you doing what right now? What it is that was your dream? Where are you headed?
Yeah, I believe so. Like when I was in the previous job, I always thought like, oh, maybe I can do something else. That kind of thoughts in my head usually. But now I cannot think of what's the next. More like, oh, how do I improve this project? How can I make it better? That kind of thoughts is in my mind. So I feel this is what I wanted to do.
Great. Very nice.
Misaki has a lot of responsibility and a lot of latitude, a lot of room to create programs and also make mistakes, which is the best kind of job.
So Misaki, where does Frith fit in again now? It wasn't just that napkin that she gave you a certificate on. She made up a certificate of confidence for you, but how long has this relationship been going on? How long have you known each other?
Well, I'd say
Almost 3 years?
Yeah, 3 years.
Yeah.
But even though I lived in Japan, she lived in Seattle, and then I'm now in Kuala Lumpur. We meet like pretty often, I think, compared to other people I have, and compared to other my friends in Japan. I think I met you a lot more than Japan.
And what's a lot more? How often do you meet or chat?
I think you should call me more often, actually. I think you should take the advice from this panel and call me more often when you're feeling stuck or you're having trouble. I just want to share another story. This is not about Misaki. It's about another friend of mine who is a brilliant entrepreneur. And when his startup had a moment of real trouble, he came to me, he said, I need to have coffee with you. And we sat down for coffee and he said, my business is failing. I'm not going to make it. And I said, tell me the story. And it turned out that one of his vendors who provided some software for his product had not lived up to their contract. And so he was in trouble with his relationships with clients. And I said, your hero is Elon Musk. Do you think Elon Musk has always had it easy? Do you think he's never faced a moment when he was scared? And do you think he gave up? He didn't. And that friend of mine, his name's Roman, by the way, he's brilliant. He went out, he apologized to his clients. He didn't blame the vendor. He just said, please give me another chance. And his business has done fabulously. So you try to do anything big and you will have moments when you feel like it's all going to collapse. And that's when you call your mentor. and you just, like Rosanne said, you ask for help.
Mhm.
No, I agree. We're also like at Startup Lady, we are trying to build that community that we've kind of been talking about vaguely, and like Rosanne has also mentioned. And of course, Startup Lady, we're also struggling because we used to do monthly events and we did in-person events. And with everyone in our community struggling, we're really trying our best to be better and to provide value and support for everyone. And I was struggling too. So I actually had a nice call with my mentor in San Diego, and it gave me a lot of like clarity and guidance. And it's really like kind of like the story you just mentioned. I was really glad to talk to June about everything that's going on. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and one really hard thing when you're starting up, whether it's a business or a volunteer activity or just whatever it is that's new, where you really want to meet a need that you see. I think one of the hardest things is that the people right around you who you think are with you and that have, you know, participated in your enthusiasm, etc., that without any warning might just drift away or lose interest. And that can, you can feel that so personally, because every time you have an idea, the idea has to be backed by just endless follow-up, follow-up, follow-up. I've maintained for a long time that the reason that anything fails is because people don't follow up. They start something and there's some detail that's involved with it, or someone has said they would do something to collaborate with you and they don't do it. So it takes a lot to just keep pulling people in. It's really hard. I think that's one of the very discouraging aspects of all of this. And you can, you know, you can be fooled by that because you think, oh, well, they just really don't care. And the fact is that they have to be reminded. And then that's, I don't know if that's ringing a bell at all with you, Misaki, but you many times people right around you who are supposed to be working with you, and it's even their job to work with you, will fail. They just won't do it. They won't do what they are supposed to be doing. And you often have to go and take care of it. Take care of it yourself, because you can't necessarily reprimand them and say, oh, you lazy bum, or something like that. I mean, sometimes you just have to do what they're supposed to be doing. And unfortunately, that is the survival thing. It just, and as for instance, I mean, that's just a big piece that's often forgotten, that people who succeed have really had to do that time and time again. They've had to step in and do somebody else's job to keep things going. I don't know if that if anybody relates to that, but
I love that. I love what you brought up, Misaki, when you said how it makes you feel good, how you get reward from helping people, even if they don't necessarily appreciate it in the moment. And I think I don't know where we are on time here, Koko, but I just want to say something that, Rosanne, I don't know what the trajectory of my life would have been if you had not backed my project, because you did much more than say, okay, we'll sponsor you. I made a lot of mistakes, and Rosanne helped me correct course, find my way. Rosanne was incredibly hardworking. I remember you flying 15 hours from Tashkent to Seattle and working nonstop the whole flight. There was no internet in those days. There was no in-flight internet, but Rosanne didn't ever sleep. She didn't ever take a break. That's how committed she was to my project.
well, here's the thing. I need to interrupt you for just a second, because I do want to say to everyone that there are moments in history that just will never repeat themselves. And when Gorbachev came into office and when the doors opened, everybody sensed this, you know, and there's a saying, you know, if you can get your foot in the door, you'll get in the door. You'll get in the door. And they've often said that about revolutions. Don't let the revolutionaries get even their foot in the door, because once they do, they're going to be in the door. And you know, President Eisenhower started the Sister City program because he was so sick of war. And he said, the people want peace. And when people finally decide they want peace, you just better get out of their way because they will have it. And so what we sensed was, this is a really magical moment. I mean, when I was studying Russian, I never believed, never, that there would not be a Soviet Union. It just didn't seem possible. In the same way, I never believed that we would have a Central Asian community in Seattle. We have people who now living in Seattle who came out after the Berlin Wall went down, who came into Seattle from all over Central Asia. So we have people from Central Asia living. I mean, we would have loved to have that when we started the Sister City program. But at any rate, it was
you get what you ask for, Rosanne.
Yeah, exactly. That was, those of us who started studying Russian after the first Soviet satellite went up in 1957, 56, I guess it was. We just realized that we've been waiting for this a long time and never thought this would happen. So the intensity was just something, and it was like one of these things, you got to grab this opportunity, but to grab it, you just have got to be on it every second. And a friend and I who ran the committee said, you know, if there's a phone call, my friend said, if there's a phone call to me at 5 o'clock in the morning, it's from Rosanne, it has to do with Tashkent. Because we were on that from morning till night for 5 years in order to make all those exchanges happen. But it was worth it. And that's also, you know, when you talk about business opportunities, if you see that a moment has come, and right now, even with this pandemic, there are a lot of people who are doing a lot of serious thinking about what are the opportunities here? You know, what do we have time to think about right now that we hadn't thought about before? And how can we prevent this sort of thing from happening again? So there's a lot of opportunity there. But seizing the moment, and then when you see somebody doing that, then, you know, it's time to step in and help and help them achieve it. We won't survive otherwise, I think.
Well, yeah, thank you, Rosanne. So I guess like we're slowly going over. So I'd like to kind of ask Misaki to close this conversation today. And my question for you, Misaki, is when do you think you will become a mentor? And maybe you will want to pay it forward and share your experiences with a mentee as well.
Sure. I hope I have become mentor already before. Yeah, I don't believe mentor-mentee relationship is always one way. It's always the both ways. So even I believe I help some ways as well.
I think Misaki's been paying it forward a long time.
Yeah, I was going to say that before you did, Misaki. I think you already have been a mentor.
Yeah.
You were a mentor to Frith when she needed your help.
Yeah.
In Japan, isn't that true?
Absolutely. She still explains a lot of things to me.
How they think.
So instead of, maybe the way to think about this, Koko, is instead of looking for a mentor, the goal is to collect as many mentors and mentees as we possibly can.
And
I like that idea.
Start thinking about the people who've been a mentor to you. You know, I just have said, my sisters, my older sisters, there were 10 children in our family. I was number 8. And my sisters were all older and they all took care of me. You know, I really learned a lot. I learned everything that I know about writing letters from my oldest sister and spelling. So I think it would be interesting to make a list, as Frith says, of who has been a mentor to me in my life, and maybe sit down and write them a thank you letter.
Sometimes forget the whole actually. Like during this session, I'm like, oh, this one was also mentor. This one was also mentor. Many people came up in my mind. Yeah, but I cannot memorize them, all of them, every single day. So yeah, sometimes I remember I should thank to them.
Yeah, thank yous are, we need more of them.
Yeah.
And this was very nice tonight because we're thanking each other here in this program. And I think that's great. I don't think about Frith every day of the year. But whenever we touch base and, go back to that relationship, it's a very refreshing thing. And it's been rewarding. It's nice to be thanked. This isn't the reason I did it, but it's very nice to get a thank you.
Thank you, Rosanne. You make me want to pass it on.
Yeah, I will pass it on to my next generation.
Yeah. And I'll keep doing that. And Koko, you too.
Yes, definitely. I've learned so much from everyone that I've met in my life. And I also have some mentors here in Japan, like Wolfgang, who's also one of our mentors in Startup Lady. And everyone else I've met here has made such a big impact on everything that I think and do and that I am right now. So I'm very grateful to everyone. I can't name everyone, but yeah. And thank you all three of you for making time to be with us today with Startup Lady. I know that there were so many great lessons and values that you shared that I'd love to kind of recap, but I think the two main points that I'd like to just kind of recap here is, for anyone to kind of make sure to have aligned viewpoints and goals, even if someone is more experienced that's around, it's better to find a good mentee who kind of shares like the motivations as you do and vice versa. And the other thing is, mentorship, it's not a contract, as the three speakers today shared with us. There is no fixed form or structure. I completely agree. It's been the same for me. It kind of naturally happens. Sometimes it's just one conversation that kind of changes the whole aspect of the relationship. And it definitely is a connection that can last a lifetime. And as you've heard from these three wonderful guest speakers, that it can really change your life. And it also is dependent on your commitment to the relationship as well. And as everyone also mentioned, it's definitely not one way. It's both ways. Everyone learns and everyone shares. And then the greatest thing is being able to pass it on to someone else. So yeah, I hope all of you here today enjoyed this discussion that we had with Frith, Rosanne, and Misaki. And I hope that, we can keep these going. So please let us know, please support us. We do have like a donation page. We would be very grateful. We are a volunteer-based organization. And our next live will be on Tuesday, June 30th at 7:30 p.m. with Ryusuke Komura of Venture Cafe. He's going to be, I'm going to have a Q&A session with him, kind of like to figure out how to think like an entrepreneur in all of your projects. It's basically a kind of like recasting of fast decision-making, agile process, and stakeholder analysis. So useful for anyone trying to initiate and grow a new idea. Doesn't specifically mean you have to be an entrepreneur. So please make sure to join us. And our next upcoming event is in 4 days from now. It will be on Thursday, June 18th at 7 p.m. It will be SLN Startup Lady Night June with JB, the founder of Yamaneko, Agile Coach and CEO, focusing on the topic of building happy teams. Definitely something that we can all learn from at this time. And yeah, please stay tuned and follow our page, as well as please join our Facebook community, and you can maybe share thoughts, ideas, anything with like-minded startup ladies and non-binary. So thank you again for your time. I know it's Sunday on this side of the world, and I know that it's Saturday evening on that side of the world. Wherever you are, we hope you enjoyed your time with us, and thank you for being with Startup Lady, and see you next time.
It was wonderful. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Misaki, Koko. Nice to
Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Good night.